Может быть, стоя она будет, да?
Она будет стоя, да.
Начинать уже?
Сейчас.
Скажите.
Да.
Хорошо. Вы одели.
Давайте проверим связь. Оденьте, пожалуйста, наушники. Кнопочка есть у вас. Вот здесь. Включить кнопочку. Нажимаете, появляется нолик. Если вы нажимаете в эту кнопку, появится канал. Вам нужен первый канал. Первый же канал, да? Первый канал. С этой стороны у нас есть звук. Вы можете погромче сделать. Пожалуйста, переводчики. Давайте тестово. Дорогие переводчики, звук проверка. Всем ли слышно? Кому не слышно? Всем слышно?
Можно начинать? Мы продолжаем нашу работу по повестке дня, по программе конференции. Слово для доклада представляется Майи Орешник, директор Департамента научных исследований и инновационных разработок завода «Эргофарма», город Цели, Словения, на тему «Когнитивные нарушения. Актуальная и междисциплинарная проблема». Пожалуйста, мы приступаем к работе.
Good evening, everybody. Hope you can hear me. If everything is okay, please wave, wink, anything. Okay, perfect. So, as said, I'm okay. I'm Maya Orishnik. I'm Science and Research Director with a company that is developing also the neuralism. We are coming from Slovenia, and we are focused on scientifically supported private label food supplements. Today, I will go with you over the background of the indication, everything that is connected with the cognitive decline. I will just cover several indications that could be potentially correlated with the cognitive decline, and then we will continue with the positioning and the support that we can see with the neurolysine sachets. And for the end, we'll also just check our production capabilities for you to have better idea where the product exactly is coming from. So when we're talking about cognitive decline, one of the first main things that come to mind is dementia. And dementia is considered when we have an acquired brain syndrome that is characterized by a decline from previous level of cognitive function, and we have impairment of at least 2 different cognitive domains. And this is also in line with the latest ICD-11 definition. Dementia is basically an umbrella term for describing the characteristics of various diseases, and we can also further divide it to the different stages. On one side we have primary dementia, and in this case we know that this is something that is originating from the brain in relation to the generative happening in the brain region that is related to the nerves and that is progressing in its course. We could also have a secondary dementia, and in this case, unlike with the primary dementia, this could be a reversible process, and it's related so not to neurological factors, but to other conditions like iron deficiency anemia, for example. And we also can have pseudo-dementias that are related, let's say, with psychological disorders and are more common in older adults. When we are talking about the cognitive impairment, we are always considering that the activities are more, that the situation is more serious than it would be in case of general aging. And when we are talking about the course, again, we have several stages. First stage would be the early stage where the symptoms are not that strong yet. And this is also often overlooked because the symptoms are not that strong. And it's also kind of unfortunate because this would be also the stage where we could address the situation the best. Then we have the middle stage, and here the signs and symptoms are progressing already, and they are becoming more obvious, and this is also the time when the situation is most often recognized, while at the end we have the late stage, and here we can see the complete dependence already on the others, and a big burden for the individual and his caretakers. So the problem of dementia is also a global problem. We have data and statistics from World Health Organization that is showing that so the latest data from 2019, about 50 million people worldwide are already living with dementia. Further on, each year, additional 10 million people are being recognized to have dementia, and the numbers are just about to increase also with the aging of the population. And the estimation that we have that until 2030, around 82 individuals will already be diagnosed with dementia, while in next 20 years, so up until 2050, these numbers are about to be doubled. So it's already a really pressing global situation. Similar is the statistic in Europe, so where we are coming from, and we see that in population over 60, the latest estimation was that there were 9.1 million people, which was more than 50% more than in 2000s. And again, the prevalence in the populations is about to increase also significantly in the future. What's important to know here is that on one hand, of course, the cognitive impairment and dementia are troublesome for the people that are affected by this condition. But on the other hand, this is also a big burden for the relatives, caretakers, and in big picture also the social functioning and the economy. And if we continue with a bit more specific potential indication, we have a post-stroke cognitive impairment. And the estimation is that more than, let's say, over 70% of the people, of the stroke survivors, have some deficits in the cognitive functioning. And what's already understood that we cannot talk about the exact number yet, because there's also a need for better diagnosis, intervention, and also treatment. When we are talking about post-stroke cognitive impairment, we are thinking about the problems that are occurring after the stroke, following in the 3 to 6 months after the occurrence of the stroke. We also divide it in the deficits that are specific to the site of the lesion of the stroke, and also the deficits that are actually connected to the situation that were preceding the stroke, so potentially already present before. And one of the specific positioning is the post-stroke dementia, which can be either immediate or delayed cognitive decline that begins usually within the 6 months after the stroke. And this condition then is not reversible, so is again the gradual decrease of the function. And so the last division is on early and late stage post-stroke cognitive impairment, because either the situation happens immediately after the occurrence of the stroke, or it happens in the preceding months after the occurrence. And if we are discussing treatment options, as far as we know that specifically for the post-stroke cognitive impairment, there are no pharmacologically treatment that would be approved. But of course that we know that for other disease like Alzheimer's, there are some treatments that are in use. Most often this would be the cholinesterase inhibitors. And while those are okay and functioning for several types of dementia, the research that has been done on the post-stroke cognitive impairment has shown that either they haven't shown specific benefits that were better as placebo, or that on the other hand that the effects would be unlikely to show actually a clinical effect, that would be clinically important. So with that in mind, we also need to know, as you know, that with the cholinesterase inhibitors, there's also a chance of variety of the side effects. And if we, on one hand, know that it seems that the support is not that strong, and that we have, on the other hand, the side effects, it puts into question the usage of such conditions in this indication. Of course, if there's elderly person that has been already before diagnosed with dementia and also has a stroke afterwards, in this case, the treatment with makes sense also. The next condition is more recent. So as you all remember really well, probably that a couple of years ago there was a presence of novel coronavirus, SARS-CoV-2, which usually manifests as pneumonia or upper respiratory tract infection. It can also continue to the multiple organ failure. And while this condition on its own has been a burden for the health system, what has become obvious in the following years that there's also a strong presence of the post-COVID or so-called long COVID syndrome. In the recent years, several definitions have been already implemented. One is from the World Health Organization, saying that when there are persistent symptoms that are usually happening for more than 3 months after infection, so when after confirmed infection with SARS-CoV-2, that they last for at least 2 months and cannot be explained by any other alternative indications, then in this case this would be considered post-COVID-19 condition. Similar is the post-COVID-19 syndrome definition by National Institute of Health and Care Excellence in the UK, that is saying that this is a constellation of symptoms which develop during or following COVID-19 infection, persist for at least 12 weeks, and are not sufficiently explained again by an alternative diagnosis. And the data here is really staggering because actually it has been estimated that more than 30% of individuals were, even with asymptomatic cases, were affected or are still affected. And when we check the population that has been hospitalized, the percentage is even higher and is estimated to be present in around 80% of this population. Symptoms, in this case, are quite general, but still really unpleasant because mostly we're talking about the fatigue and on the other hand, again, the cognitive impairment. There can be also other neuropsychiatric or physical manifestation like depression, shortness of breath, and so on. And since, again, this is a new condition and we don't know that much about it yet, is that currently there are also no established and effective treatments for such post-viral conditions. The one thing that we know is that we need to know more, that we need to put more into the research and possible treatment options. So if we are judging based on the mechanisms of the COVID infection, there are various mechanisms such as the cytokine storm, the microvascular regions, metabolic abnormalities that are all related also with the nervous system, which could be a cause for the dysfunction or the damage that then causes the long COVID syndrome. And we also, in general, we see that the recoveries of the COVID-19 infection have a higher risk of cognitive impairment, which can be also a key aspect of the potential long-term effects of the disease. And then the symptoms are quite worrying. Let's say they have, several options of the symptoms. When it comes to cognitive impairment, the most common are the slower information processing, speed, decreased working memory, impaired executive function. I think that in, general audience or in the media, the most often it was referred to as the brain fog that's happening after the disease, and this is the term that really stick to this indication. And the last important part is that, which is not helping with the long COVID and cognitive impairment, is that significant amount of, again, around 70% of the recoveries has been also dealing with trouble sleeping, with either insomnia, hypersomnia, or daytime sleepiness. And due to the issues with the sleeping, of course, then you also have a higher option to have also issues with the cognitive functioning, and this is not helping with the whole indication. And the last, short condition that we have is the post-traumatic cognitive impairment. Either we are talking about concussions, that is the most type of traumatic brain injury, or about, the traumatic brain injury. Those symptoms include headaches, fatigue, depression, anxiety, irritability, as well, of course, also the impaired cognitive function. So we have really unspecific effects, and normally it's expected that such symptoms would be resolved within the 3 months post-injury. But actually, updated data shows that approximately half of the individuals with a single concussion are demonstrating the long-term cognitive impairment, and that this is really something that maybe is not recognized enough and needs additional research on the function. And with the traumatic brain injury, we can see that there are a variety of the long-term outcomes. There are different cognitive impairment situations, such as loss of memory, processing speech problems, or executive dysfunction. And the also important part is that this can then trigger further decline in the cognitive function. And the current estimation is that out of the all dementia cases, 5 to 15% are actually attributable to the traumatic brain injuries. And with that, we are, let's say, covering the first overview, and would like to continue with the introduction of neurolysin sachets. We've seen before that we don't always have, since those are like not the biggest indications and the strongest positioning, that we don't always have the best option to address such indications, and that we're also struggling with the, let's say, correct drugs for the indication. So we are now also presenting a natural alternative, so the neurolysin sachets that are based on several natural ingredients and essential nutrients that can potentially be also helpful in such indication. So the neurolysin sachets are a food supplement, first of all, so not a drug, but food supplement that is based on in majority, on the unique natural ingredient that is called Sibelius sage. This is a branded ingredient. Also, there are 2 other branded ingredients in the products, which means that these ingredients come with their own level of scientific support, that we are always getting the same quality of the ingredients, which can be different if we are buying commodity ingredients, and that, that is a source that we actually can really trust. The product comes in the form of sachets, so there's 10 sachets per box. It's usually recommended to have at least 30-day supplementation, and it's really beneficial that the product is available in the sachets, because now we have more and more reports from the elderly that they are that they have enough of pills, capsules, tablets, because they just remind them of the drugs, and sometimes they have swallowing issues, and that the different galenic forms are actually preferred. So the different combination of the active ingredients in the product offers us different positioning, because to some extent we can see that the studies support also short-term usage, so we see some effect about immediate supplementation, but also long-term positioning makes sense, as we'll see with several conditions. So the main active ingredient, as mentioned in the product, is called Sibelius sage, and so it's basically extract from sage plant. But in reality, it's not that simple. So sage plant in general has a long history of use, especially in Western herbal medicine. And for example, in Slovenia, sage is used for upper respiratory tract infection or throat pains or something like that. But in other, let's say, cultures like from ancient Greeks, Egyptians, Romans, they also believe that sage has important memory function. And this has been then later confirmed through science, which has shown that sage has antioxidant and anti-inflammatory and estrogenic properties, which are then also related to several diseases. So, I mean, addressing these conditions can be beneficial in several diseases that are majority, all of them related to aging. And out of this, we can also see the beneficial effects on the cognitive function. And the other thing is that, so sage is widely present worldwide, but there has been a lot of the tests done on the ingredient that we are using, which helps us confirm that we are actually really using the ingredient that has the best benefit for the function. So they did various testing first testing the profile through the, let's say, NMR spectroscopy and similar techniques to determine which cultivar of sage would be the best. And they use different combinations. For example, they were testing sage that has been grown, the same sage but grown in different condition. Different varieties of sage and growing in the same conditions and in different conditions. So there was a whole matrix of different conditions, subspecies, and so on, in order to determine which is the one that makes the most sense to be used in this cognitive function beneficial use. And yeah, the result is the Sibelius sage. So the ingredient that we are using now is grown in a specific period, so it's harvested between November and March, which is also so in the southern hemisphere where the ingredient is coming from, is the part of the year where the environmental conditions are the most harsh, which means that also the plant has the most secondary metabolites that are then also it's accumulating these secondary metabolites that are then also beneficial when it's used as a food supplement. And by now, all the processes, cultivation, manufacturing, and also the processing of the ingredient are being completely standardized, done with within the highest standards, and so which enables us to know that we have the best quality of the products available at all times. And so this selection process that was mentioned before has been in big part done through the Chronoscreen platform. Chronoscreen platform is a patented platform that is using the C. elegans roundworm. The specific of the model organism C. elegans is that it has many physiological similarities to the humans, including or especially when we are talking about neuronal or digestive system. And so as such, it was recognized to be a good model organism for those indications also for the human health, because when we have such a high amount of the tests that we would like to do, it's really helpful and beneficial to be working with such platforms. The main thing that was tested with the Chronoscreen technology is lifespan. So the chronological lifespan extension, which means that they are basically they have the roundworms and they are exposed to a certain nutrients, so in this case also the Sibelius sage, and then they are checking the response of the C. elegans to this addition in their environment. And what we can see is that if there are beneficial effect on the organism, the lifespan of such organism will extend significantly. And then it's also known that such extension is the evidence that for potential health benefits, which can also determine the pathways that are essential for the ingredient's activity. So we are not only testing the lifespan, but we are also testing the specific genetic reactions to the exposure of the nutrients. And with the Chronoscreen technology, we also seen, so all in all, that the supplementation is beneficial for the effects on the cellular aging. So from this, we can conclude to have a delayed onset of the age-related conditions. And when we have a delayed aging process, this for sure is also expected to have beneficial levels on the cognitive function later in life. And if we check specific results, so first we have the results from the Chronoscreen test when they were testing different sage species. So yeah, different species. So all of those graphs are related to Salvia officinalis plants. all were exposed to the chronoscreen technology. And we can see that in those two cases, we can also actually see the decrease in the lifespan, while in those two we see increase, and the plant, the subspecies that was grown in the most optimal conditions is the one that is now used in the Sibelius sage, and here we can see around 12% improvement in the chronological lifespan as measured through the chronoscreen technology. The other graph that we have is again from the chronoscreen technology, and again we are checking the extension of the lifespan, but here the Sibelius sage has been compared to other drugs with a similar positioning, so all the acetylcholinesterase inhibitors, and we can see actually that also here the Sibelius sage, the natural extract has shown the best results in the life span extension. Okay. And by that time, you're probably wondering about the potential mechanism of action of the ingredient. So for Sibelius sage, it's known that through the tests on model animals, but also tests on humans, that it has the ability to inhibit the acetylcholinesterase, which, as you know, is important for the processing of the neurotransmitters and playing an important role in the formation of the memories. But also, on the other hand, the material is regulating, so increasing the expression of several genes, especially those that are related to lipid metabolism and insulin signaling, so both indications related to metabolic health, and while metabolic conditions can also be related to can have significant effect on the aging health and aging brain. Also, this can be important factor for the functioning of the Sibelius sage and the brain health. While the third mechanism was related also again to other metabolic genes, to cytochrome P450S, and this is important because similarly this gene is also upregulated when we are adding donzepil to the system. And with that, we can continue actually with the clinical support that we have. So before we just had the indication about the mechanisms, but I would now also like to cover the scientific support, so the clinical studies. First study was a randomized, double-blind, placebo-controlled crossover trial. Here we have elderly population, and what's important to know, so the population was older than 65 years, and they were considered generally healthy population, so they didn't have any cognitive impairment recognized yet. And this was a short-term trial, so it was just one-day supplementation, and they were checking the effect after the single dose of the supplement. They did that through the computer programs, so through the battery of the standardized test that can evaluate the functioning of specific brain function, specifically secondary and working memory and the aspects of attention. And they had several assessment points. So the first, there was a baseline test, then supplementation, and they followed with the test after 1 hour, 2.5 hours, 4 hours, and 6 hours. Here we can see the results in comparison to the placebo product. So since it was a placebo-controlled crossover trial, the main results are comparing towards the placebo product. And we can see that at all time periods, so at all time points that were measured, there has been a statistically significant effect for secondary memory, specifically recognition and recall tasks. On the majority of the time points, there has been also significant effects for accuracy of attention. And right after the supplementation, so 1 hour after the supplementation, the first time period, we can also see that there was a statistically significant effect on the working memory. So on the graph, we have the results for the better functioning of the Sibelius Sage product, because we can see that we had significantly lower response times with the tiring of the population after the supplementation. Second study was a bit different. Because this was a long-term trial. It was going on for 4 months in total. It included daily supplementation, so not a single dose, but a daily supplementation. And the population wasn't considered healthy because they were already diagnosed with mild to moderate Alzheimer's disease. So we know that they were supposed to have a cognitive decline that was progressing, and this situation was going on for at least 6 months. And the results have shown, we have here the results from the 2 Alzheimer's disease associated scales. So one is the Alzheimer's disease assessment scale, and the other is clinical dementia rating scale. And we can see that in both cases, with both of the measurements, with the Sibelius Sage supplementation, after, let's say, after the somewhere around 4 weeks, we can see in this case after the 4 weeks, in this case a bit after that, we can see significantly better improvements with the Sibelius Sage supplementation. Actually, the score has been decreasing in the instance of Sibelius Sage, while in the placebo group the score has been then continuously to grow and, let's say, to progress into the negative way. And the last study that we would like to present on the Sibelius Sage was done again on a different population and in different settings, because here we have again a double-blind, randomized and placebo-controlled trial, but in this time the population was younger. So we had on one side the teenager from 12 to 14 years, and on the other side young adults from 18 to 25 years. So this trial shows us that the product can also be used, let's say, for busy people, students, young professionals and so on, that are looking for additional cognitive boost, because again the results, the outcomes were tested on the computerized test. In this case this was CogTrack, which is coming from Cambridge University, and it's probably one of the most recognized cognitive tests that is currently used. And they were able to show that in the same day after the supplementation, there has been improvement in word recall, in short-term episodic memory, and also improved ability to focus. And another important fact for all of the, let's say, the studies that we mentioned, that throughout the supplementation period, in no case there were any safety concerns or adverse events that would be related to the supplementation. So not in young, not in teenagers, not in older adults. And with that, we also know that we have a safe profile of the product and the ingredient that we are using. Here you can also follow the link through the QR code that is taking you to the website of the ingredient, where some additional information can be found. The other branded ingredient in the product is called lipofer. And lipofer is source of iron. It's a micronized and microencapsulated source of iron that has a unique delivery system, which means that it has significantly reduced chance of any side effects because of the protection. And on the other side, it comes with a good taste. Because if you need to supplement with the iron, taste is one of the most important aspects, because we really want to make sure that the product can be taken in the long term. Efficacy of the product has been proven in several clinical studies. We are also investing in a lot of research from children to adults. But maybe in general, it's also interesting that a lot of comparison has been done in simply the absorption levels, and we can see that compared to several basic other iron salts that are commonly used, the absorption of iron through lipofer is, let's say, from 3 to almost 5 times better than with other sources. And why exactly we would be adding lipofer to the products? So even in the beginning, we mentioned that we have a chance of pseudodementia that can occur due to other conditions like iron deficiency anemia. On the other hand, we know that even if the iron, let's say hemoglobin levels as the main marker of iron, are still in the levels that are considered healthy, but the iron stores that are usually measured through the ferritin levels are low, even that can have an impact on cognitive functioning. So it's really important to have a sufficient amount of iron in the diet, but in reality, iron deficiency, also including anemia, is still the most common nutrient deficiency worldwide. And this situation is not, let's say, country-specific or anything, but it's really globally, regardless of the development of the country, iron deficiency is really still strongly present. So, functionally speaking, in the brain, iron is important for normative cognitive development and is involved in several mechanisms in the brain, from energy metabolism, myelin production, and neurotransmitter synthesis and function. Of course, also the main function of the